Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the T.H.O. Movie Reviews podcast, the show where we bring you passionate, honest, and insightful film criticism. I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson, and I'm here today at Oblique Coffee with three of my wonderful colleagues, starting with Patrick Belin. Patrick, how you doing?
Pretty good. Glad to be back.
Glad to have you back. And also here we have Shaunette. Mo, what's going on?
It's stuff. I'm tired.
Stuff. I love stuff. I love it when stuff is going on.
Stuff is happening.
It's so much better when stuff isn't happening. And also we have, for the first time, Sarah Schroeder. Sarah, how are you?
I'm good. Hello.
Ah, you're not Max.
No. Transform into a girl.
Well, we're here today because we're going to talk about the ethics of film criticism. Obviously, this is a big topic, but we are going to delve into it to the best of our abilities. And as I was thinking about, how best to do this, how best to attack this topic, I was thinking the first thing to do, the lowest part of fear, is to establish what terms we're talking about it. So I wanted to start by asking all of you how would you define the purpose of a film critic? So what would you say, Patrick?
Well, for me, speaking for myself personally, I just think that there's a lot of crap being put out there that deserve to be criticized. And I do take the idea of criticism seriously in terms of thinking about what I feel makes a really good watchable film. And if it doesn't reach that mark, then I'm going to say something about it. So that's it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I remember in a class I had while I was at U of O, I remember being asked to define what journalists are supposed to do, and I thought cut through the bullshit basically. But continuing on this line of thought, Sarah, how would you define a critic or the purpose of a critic?
Well, a critic should be non-biased, but that never happens. I think if you believe that a critic is not biased, it's kind of taking out what the purpose is. I think it's opinion-based, which I think a critic is, rather if I'm talking to you and I'm saying, oh, that was total crap, and this is why, they kind of bring on a whole scope of the film. Technically, they should be able to know about editing, lighting, sound. So more than the average viewer would know. But I think the purpose is for people to be able to go to them before they see a movie, or if they want to know more about a movie, and they kind of make their decision as to go or not. But I don't think you should ever just listen to a critic and be like, well, he didn't like it, so I guess I'm just not going to go see it. I think it's to see those viewpoints, and then after you see a film, it's kind of like you can critique it off of them, what they say, which is kind of fun. That's kind of what I like about film, is that everyone has their own opinion and can critique it in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point. That it actually dovetails with something that Mo and I were talking about, which is that we're not really here necessarily to tell people what to see. I mean, they can listen to us in that way that helps them, but really, it's about starting a conversation. And I think when you have that kind of a broad knowledge that you talk about, knowledge of the craft, you're in a really good position to do that.
Yeah, I feel like the same thing with what you said, journalism. It's kind of the same thing with politics. We
Yes.
go to the news.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna believe everything that CNN, MSNBC, Fox says, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. And
Absolutely,
make your own opinion. Do your own research. It's kind of the same thing, but you look at journalists as, they went to school for this. They know what they're talking about. They kind of have a broader point of view. But I think that's kind of the thing, is taking that and molding your own opinion after it.
As someone who went to school for journalism, I totally agree.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting things going on here. You two are viewing film criticism as a part of journalism. Whereas
Absolutely.
I'm coming from film criticism as a very highly judgmental art criticism.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
there's an interesting school of thoughts here.
More you're thinking about more in the realm of academia, right? Or is that how you mean? Or?
I'm seeing it as a piece of art and criticizing it as a piece of art. And
Okay.
you guys are so far discussing it as in terms of a journalistic approach. But anyways, I want to.
Well, I think
I guess it's both.
there's so many levels of it, which it's art as well. Which I think that was going to film school. It was kind of looking at films so critically and kind of looking at the editing or looking at the sound or looking at continuity, which is, before I went to film school I didn't really look at that as much. But I feel like once you take off that layer, it's also art. Like, what is art? Which is one of the hardest questions, I think. But it's also like opinion based and looking at that level. But yeah, I think it's hard because where you're coming from, like my dad, for example, does not care about movies at all. He'll just go to a theater and just be like, well, this is how I felt. I liked it or I didn't. So it's just so different as far as your personal background, I guess.
Mo, what about you? How would you define a critic and the role of a critic?
I agree to some extent that it is about. I think I'm leaning more towards what Patrick is talking about. It's, for me, criticism is not just saying like, is this movie good or bad? Does it fill the technical components of being a movie? Does it have a proper runtime? Does it have these elements of editing and sound mixing and all this stuff that a movie should have? But it's also just engaging with art. It's engaging critically. It's looking at a piece of work and thinking, what is this saying? What does this mean? Is it just on the surface level details, or is there something deeper going on? At least to me, that's the more interesting stuff. Like, just saying, is a movie good or bad? That's similarly. That's just the base stuff. That's the surface. It's, why is it good? What's good about it? What do you think about it? What does it make you think about? What do you think the author is trying to say? Does this person have some other interpretation of the material? And that to me is I guess what I'm trying to say is these are all facets of criticism. That's the facet that interests me the most, is engaging with the material, is talking with it. You know, Joss Whedon once said, art isn't a dog, art is a child, because eventually your children talk back to you.
I like that, and I like what you're saying, and I think you raised a good point that it can't just be about, analyzing quality. I find that, a lot of times, what I end up leaning towards is trying to find, the deeper meaning. And I was just thinking the other day, like, well, what's the most important film of the decade so far? One of the most important films, not my favorite, but important in terms of capturing the zeitgeist. And one that I thought of was the Social Network. And one way to look at The Social Network is, saying like, oh, it's beautifully written, it's beautifully constructed, beautifully acted. But then there's, also, saying it's plugging into the really kind of staggering technological transformation we've seen. And I think, it's exciting to dig into those kinds of things with criticism. But I mean, taking this a little further, and this goes into something you brought up, Sarah. And this is, as you said, all it's all about opinion, and I think certainly any critic aspires to a certain level of fairness, but biases do enter into it. It's such a subjective thing, and I was wondering if all three of you could talk about how you feel about that, like how you approach it and justify like undertaking criticism, knowing that it's such a subjective thing.
I think this is a very important question, and it probably gets into the heart of why I brought up this podcast idea in the first place. At what level is it considered responsible for a reviewer to bring in their own biases, opinions, and judgments of a particular film into the viewing experience and afterwards as they're writing about it. What is a fair amount? What is considered ethical? What is fair? And personally, as we made this distinction between this journalistic aspect of film criticism and this judgmental aspect, since I lean towards the latter, I feel that I tend to lean more towards being open about my biases and how I'm approaching my film criticism. So yeah.
Yeah, I think. I mean, in a certain way, I feel like being a critic, it's almost your job to be biased to a certain degree, because I mean, if it's all about personal perspective. That's it's editorializing. That's why we have so many critics and not just one voice advising people on what to see. And for me, I found that oftentimes like I'm able to write a stronger review if I'm playing into my personal experience. I remember I was reviewing Darren Aronofsky's Noah, and my way into that review was writing about seeing The Fountain when I was 15 years old, and that being this kind of really overpowering experience, and I hadn't seen anything that at that point that pushed the boundaries of what you can do in a cinematic narrative, and kind of that was my way into saying this movie Noah isn't doing that. It's not succeeding on that level. So I really think the personal stuff has a place. But Mo, what about you?
I think I'm similar. I try to be upfront about my biases, because you can again you can kind of just sit back and look at like just the technical aspects and say this is good, this is bad, but movies don't exist in a vacuum, and neither do we. We're all on some level affected by everything. You'll see one of the arguments that goes on online a lot is, can't we keep politics out of this media or that media? And it's like, no, you can't.
Probably not,
Definitely
especially
not.
with a certain subject matter.
Especially in recent times, but still,
I think you're missing a huge opportunity to start some incredible conversations by keeping it out. Like, it's got to be in there.
Yeah, but like someone described it as taking politics out of art is like trying to jump into a pool and not get wet.
Yes, I completely
that's
agree.
very good.
So like for me, I try to be upfront about my personal biases. These are the things I like. This is the experience I have. And I'll play into it. I look at something like I am an unabashed fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I will go crazy over that stuff, and part of it is because I love these comics, and it is amazing to me that they exist. Like Guardians of the Galaxy is still a miracle to me that was put together and put on screen. And I acknowledge that it has flaws. I acknowledge that there's a lot of stuff that could be done better, but at the same time, it's just amazing to me that this movie exists. So that's my take on it. Be upfront with your biases. You're gonna, even if you try to be objective, you can't be 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Well,
and this reminds me of the review you wrote of Your Name.
Yeah.
Where you start out from saying from the beginning, like, I am not necessarily the right person to review this because this isn't really my kind of thing. But from that standpoint, you went on to give a really nuanced analysis of that film.
You.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's true, and I think I think starting from there was a really interesting point to start from, and it was cool to have that up front because it gave a nice friction in the analysis, I thought.
Thanks.
But Sarah, what about you?
Well, I think that everyone wants to know each other's opinion, honestly. I think that we're very nosy people.
Yeah.
And,
Probably why Yelp is so popular.
and I think films are made to be
Probably
viewed.
why people shouldn't exist as an app.
Right. But I think movies are made to be viewed. Like the biggest thing for a film director is to get it distributed so that it can be in theaters for people to see. And honestly, at the end of the day, they want to know that feedback. They want to know what people think, because films are made to inspire people. Their themes, they're meant to relate. If a movie doesn't relate to people, why would you want to go see it? Like, the best films made.
Yeah.
Like Citizen Kane is thought by critics to be the greatest film ever made, and I completely disagree with that. I fell asleep in that film. I've tried to watch it 3 times, and every time I've fallen asleep. And it doesn't mean that I don't love film or critique it, but one of my favorite films is Goonies, and that's not a well-made film. There's so many issues with it, but the nostalgia of it and things that I love about it that inspire me or I relate to is what makes me love the movie so much. So I feel like you have to have a bias because you have to have opinion, and it's really about like why we're here right now. We're talking about this right now is because we love discussing films. I think like all of us could talk about films all day long.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the beauty of art. That's the beauty of film, and you kind of have to have those critiques there. That, I mean, Rotten Tomatoes, I love going on that site and seeing how percentage-wise what people think versus critics, which is also very interesting to see those percentages. Like maybe 15% of the critics loved it, but like 90% of the people loved it. So,
Sure.
you know, it's always one of those things where it's just such a beautiful medium because everyone has an opinion or gets inspired by certain things. When I saw Lord of the Rings for the first time, I was so inspired that I was like, yes, I want to do film. I want to make this. And it wasn't a technical aspect. It was just the way it made me feel so strongly about it. So I feel like it's one of those things where I think when you come as a critic, you should always say that I am biased because I have my own personal perspective. I have my own background. And it's kind of the beauty of it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I was thinking about, you know, what you were saying about the Goonies and the nostalgia aspect. It, you know, it made me think about like the fact that the first film I ever saw was My Fair Lady, and in fact, yeah,
Oh yes.
like in fact, so many of the movies I saw as a little kid were like kind of classic musicals of that era, like Singing in the Rain and West Side Story, and I have, you know, I have an emotional attachment to those films
And
because
that's why both of us really like La La Land a lot.
Right,
and like
right.
a lot of people who didn't watch musicals were like, I don't like this. This is stupid. Why are they singing right now? But for us, it was like, oh my gosh, it came back. Like,
right.
You know, like the classic musicals. It's like a nostalgia of bringing it back in a new way that we can see. But yeah.
That's why a lot of the people of this generation are so eager to jump back on the Disney bandwagon now that they're doing like Renaissance type movies again.
That's
Because we
true.
grew up
That's
with
a
the
good
Renaissance.
point. Yeah.
Because I know for certain my house, our VCR was constantly of Aladdin and Lion King.
Oh yeah.
Do you wear
All
out
the
the
time.
tapes?
And Roger Rabbit also.
Well, that, I mean, I was kind of like astonished by, you know, the reception of, you know, the live action Beauty and the Beast, and you know how many people went to see that, and like that's, I don't know, there's definitely the.
I still don't get why that movie exists.
I still feel
refuse
like
to see
there's such a huge part. For me, I was like, why are you ruining something that I grew up with? Like, it's meant to be a cartoon.
Right.
Stop it. But I also think it's a big thing for me where the line is, are you doing this to make money as a studio because you can't think of any other original ideas?
Yeah.
Or is it because you have something new to bring to the table? There's a reason behind it. But that gets, but it's very interesting how people get so excited when they hear, oh, a live action Beauty and the Beast. And you're
Right,
like, but
sure.
it's exactly the cartoon, just with real people. But there's still
It's
some
not just
CGI.
that. It's that the cartoon was good.
Yeah, well,
like
yeah.
the other thing, like a lot of the we're going on a tangent here, so you know, surprise. But
Or not.
Like the Disney, this is something that's been in my head, is that like the Disney movies thus far, they've been movies that aren't great. Like they're regarded as classics, but like Jungle Book, it doesn't really have a plot. You look, some like Sleeping Beauty is very light on that kind of stuff. The remakes add something. They add a modern filter and context and more sharp storytelling elements. Beauty and the Beast was made 20 years ago. Filmmaking hasn't changed that much in terms of how we tell stories. So what's there to add?
Politics has changed. I haven't seen it, but from what I understand, the only real difference that they added was to throw in LGBT politics into it.
Yes, there is one gay character.
Right, and that's what got people talking.
That
And I feel like that's a
thing too.
style
Is
of marketing.
you wouldn't even know he was gay until the end.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
so
true,
it's kind of
yeah.
this thing. It's like we're still scared to do this, but we're gonna do it.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff like that kind of feels like lip service. Like,
Yeah.
like kind of like making Sulu gay and Star
I'm gonna
Trek
call
Beyond.
this baby
Yeah.
steps. I'm optimistic about it because I think Disney's gonna head in the right direction.
I don't know.
That's all right.
Well, I mean, kind of going back to what we were talking about, criticism. I mean, we've never really not in the years since we've been doing T.H.O. had a discussion like this. Because I mean, we're like any journalist. Like what we're doing revolves around looking at something else. And we rarely, I think, turn like the microscope, on ourselves because that's not what the job description is. But I think this is a great opportunity to do that. So I mean, I guess I wanted to know what all of you think about the idea of is criticism an art unto itself, or is it just an offspring of the art of film? What do you think, Sarah?
I think it's an offspring of the art of film. I feel like I don't know. I have a really hard time with film critics.
Can I interject something?
Yeah.
I feel like at this point, listening to all of your responses to the first question, I feel like we have a sort of consensus that there is a reflexivity with film criticism, that we're no longer in the 1950s where we're just objectively criticizing something, that we do throw in our own biases and our own opinions to this. And I think that's an intellectual trend, in general, and I think that's a good thing. But what was the question? The second question you asked again?
Well, I think you're kind of nodding towards the answer, but is it is criticism an art in and of itself?
Right. Earlier I was thinking about how the film viewing experience is so subjective, and because of that, I think it is kind of an art with every film critic, which is why it's interesting for me, anyways, to follow particular individuals in the community, because I kind of know them, I know where they stand, and I'm curious what they think about certain types of films, which is why I read them and follow them. Whereas if everybody went back to this idea of pure objectivity, then it's a little bit boring, because I don't know where the reviewer stands, and I could just read any film criticism and it wouldn't really matter. And I don't think I want to live in that world.
But I feel like it's also a question of like, why do you listen to critics? Like, do you want opinion, or do you just want to know like how the movie is structured, or like if it's very basic, like this is the way it is from the beginning, and then here's this character structure. Like, are you listening to critics for that, or are you listening for if they think it's good or not, or if it's a thing of should I go see this or not? Or I feel like it's also the audience's intention of listening to a critic, which
Why
I feel
they're looking towards a critic, essentially?
why? And I feel like at the end of the day, that does kind of show the art of the critic, because they're there for a reason. Like, if no one listened to critics, there would be none. So I feel like that's kind of, I think it's comes off of the art of film, but yeah, I think it's kind of turned into its kind of art, because in the 1950s, like, you couldn't really put much in film too. There were so much strict guidelines, and now
Sure.
politics, everything, social injustices are all in film and everything. So
I think that's in terms of like reading reviews or listening to critics or going on YouTube and watching people rant about certain movies. I think people just want to know if something is worth seeing, and in that question, I think there's a question of the what and the why. I mean, some critics are better at describing what is so great about it, what is not so great about it, and on the other side, why it's great and why it's not great. And for me, anyways, I like getting that kind of opinions, and I like the why part. And when I approach film criticism, I like to also focus on the why part and not so much on the what part.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, I think like one concern I have is people just looking to critics to decide what to see, and I really think people should
that sort of thing.
Mo's doing the thumbs up, thumbs down for all our listeners. yeah, and I think the reason I'm not a fan of that is because I really think people should make those choices based on pedigree. I think if you have an actor you like, or you have a director you like, you should see their films regardless of any critic says. What any critic says. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Gavin Hood, who won an Oscar for Sozi and last directed Eye in the Sky. His movies get a lot of bad reviews. I see every single one because I think something about what Gavin Hood is doing, the kinds of issues he's tackling, the way he tells stories, that resonates with me, and I feel like people should see what they want, and I feel like if we get to that point, and that gives critics more freedom to be getting out of what you're alluding to, that kind of binary judgment, and really get into the issues, get into the analysis, get into the technical stuff like you mentioned, Sarah, and I think that's I don't know, I think that's ideal, but I think the reality is that's never going to happen purely because I mean just look at the box office. Rotten Tomatoes scores have an effect on what people go see. Mission Impossible Rogue Nation was tracking a lot lower than it actually opened. I have to believe a 90% or whatever Rotten Tomatoes score had something to do with that. And, people like the movie, so I can't complain too much.
Let's make a little. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Can we make a little side note as to how Rotten Tomatoes work, just to clarify?
Yes.
I'm not
Yeah.
exactly sure.
So I mean, Rotten Tomatoes is very limited in their content. Yes, they publish some articles, but their main job is to be an aggregator, to collect reviews, to say whether that review is positive or negative, and determine are the majority of the reviews positive or as in Rotten Tomatoes nomenclature, fresh.
Yeah.
But you have to be really careful with this stuff, because if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, sometimes they'll read a very, very lukewarm review and say, oh, it's positive enough. They said that it was the New Yorker's review of The Avengers was a fresh, quote unquote, fresh review. That review tore the movie to shreds.
Yeah.
They hated that movie. And so I think, and that's another argument, I think, for, not, thinking, critic, something like Rotten Tomatoes is an advice, column, telling people what to spend their money on. Mm-hmm. You've got to take it, with a grain of salt. This is a vast machine. And
it's important because we do live in the age of Yelp culture. Movies are made and broken because of Rotten Tomatoes.
And I think it's kind of
a machine aggregator.
Yeah, I think it's a disservice for a filmmaker.
Absolutely.
For me as a filmmaker, that's why I have an issue with the whole system and critics, because I don't know, it's just kind of this thing where I don't think any film is just bad. There's good and bad
absolutely.
elements.
Sure.
And so I think it's kind of this thing where just saying, oh, well, this has a bad review on Rotten Tomatoes, I'm just not going to go see it. It's a service to the filmmaker, because maybe you would like parts of it, or like Passengers is a good example for me. I actually looked on Rotten Tomatoes and it was really, really bad. And so I was like, oh, maybe I won't see it. And then I checked myself and I was like, no,
Right, exactly.
you go see it. So I saw it, and while I didn't care for the movie, there are lots of things that I actually really liked.
Exactly.
And that I thought, well, if they did this differently, this could actually be an awesome concept. So I feel like it can be such a disservice to the film industry, the filmmakers itself, because it could be a good film and you're just not, the general population's not going to go watch it just because of one website.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just to be clear, Yelp aggregates published film reviews from reputable sources as opposed to just people like lay people.
Well, Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, they're doing both. They're you've got people, Rotten Tomatoes users who contribute their reviews, and there's a separate score based on that.
Wow,
but
that
the
sounds
main,
even worse.
I know,
Critics-
yeah, but the main
critics say
score
what the audience should say.
Yeah.
That's doubly worse.
Yeah.
It's an interesting. It makes an interesting paradigm for me because you got like Batman v Superman came out and it was like 22% critics liked it, like 79% audience liked it.
Yeah.
the 27% or whatever was too high in my opinion. But that's another
Not a
story.
good movie. Holy smokes, Bullwinkle. All right.
By the way, I finally once I started working for Land Week, I finally got on Rotten Tomatoes, so I'm happy to be able to sway things
You've
in my
arrived.
direction
Yeah, you're
incrementally. I know, yeah.
I think I'm
well,
gonna
I
jump on
reviewed
that
Arrival
right
too, so for that.
Right on.
Well, I mean, Sarah, you kind of nodded towards this, like issues with critics and feeling like maybe some movies that should get a chance don't get a chance, because of reviews and the way reviews are perceived. So I wanted to talk a little bit about if any of you have have noticed either a trend or a specific instance where you feel like critics are showing good ethical behavior or bad ethical behavior. So I mean, starting with you, Mo, is there anything that comes to mind?
This is let's see, good ethical behavior, bad. Here's a weird example, or at least it seems weird to me. Is gonna be one of my favorite critics, Bob Chipman, Movie Bob. He's on YouTube. He got some notoriety for last year. Was last year
Oh, I totally know.
the Pixels review?
Yeah.
He did a review of Pixels, the Adam Sandler movie, that was absolutely vitriolic. It was pure anger for like 8 minutes, and I don't know if I didn't see the movie. I can't say if
me
it
neither.
deserved or not. I believe it did, but when he talks about it, he was upfront and basically saying that he was the prime demographic for this, in that he's someone who loves video games, especially retro games. He has a separate show where he talks about the state of the video game industry, what he likes about the old game stuff, what he likes about Super Nintendo and Dreamcast and all this stuff. And part of what offended him so much about Pixels was that they blatantly did not care about games. It was just whatever bit of pop culture ephemera they could slap onto this premise. And he's basically said it became more than just a bad movie. It was a personal offense to him that like these people were like, they took Donkey Kong and they took Pac-Man, they took all these beloved characters and shat all over them. And to me, that's kind of what you're talking about, where it's like it's showing their bias. A critic showing their bias, but again, it's being upfront about it. It's like people who know this guy know where he comes from, where he stands. So yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so what you're saying is that you feel like he handled it well because he was honest about where he was coming from.
Yeah.
Sir, what about you?
I don't know if I can think of a specific. Oh no, you should come back to me.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah,
Well,
Patrick.
Restate the question again.
Well, I mean, I was just wondering, like, can you think of like either a specific instance or like even just a trend in general that you feel like shows good or bad, ethical behavior among critics?
To me, the flagrantly bad, unacceptable sin of film criticism is when they shill for a studio. That they took money from their marketing department, etc., and just wrote glowingly about something. if that ever comes out, that's like the death knell for any critic. Nobody should ever do
Can you
that.
give an example?
I feel like there has been in the last several years, but I can't think of the specific example. But anyways, a similar instance would be the last Transformers movie where the producers of the last Transformers movie were like taking money from like the Chinese tourism board or something like that so that they can add this 5-minute video at the end saying come visit Hong Kong, that kind of bullshit.
Well, yeah, to get it to
exactly.
Yeah, that
So there's
all the time.
That's the economics of 21st
Yeah,
century.
maybe in action films too.
business in general these days is so bad. I mean,
It can be bad or good. I'm cautiously optimistic, but not very, because it's a business more than it is a show. But the Chinese box office has become such an integral part of selling
where
movies.
the money is coming from.
But that's
seed
it's
money's
not just
coming.
where the money is coming from. It's just like
Yeah.
they love American blockbusters there, and
They even went to see Warcraft.
Warcraft, huge, giant special effects blockbusters do well over there, and so I'm not exactly opposed to kind of like catering to Chinese audiences, because it means it kind of forces filmmakers not to be so hegemonous, I guess might be the right word, but probably not. It's not so much just trying to appeal to American audiences, but it's trying to be conscious about what you're saying in a global space rather than just a national space.
But-
That being said, most of the time it just means we're going to cast Fan Bingbing in one role.
I was
Like
going
three
to mention
lines.
that too. Yeah.
Not that I have anything against that actress, just like that's the kind of step they take. Is just they take one popular Chinese actor
In
put
a
them
small
in.
role where she had no dialogue.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really a gamble.
I
yeah.
think too, for an audience, you should know when you're watching. So if you're going to those big studio films, you should know what's going on as far as. I think it's like only 5% of the money that Hollywood's making is actually from Hollywood. The rest of it is,
Yeah, that sounds about
internationally
right.
and everything.
It's increasingly international.
Yeah, exactly. And when it's interesting because I talked to when I was talking about this financial. One of the head departments of the financial department of Paramount, she was talking about how when the Chinese come to visit, they always say every year, like, we really like these action films, but we want to see more realistic, like down home movies, which is really interesting because when they pass through, they don't want them. So I feel like
Yeah,
they
that's
are looking
fascinating.
for something, but they don't know exactly what. So I feel like audiences should know, like the Sundance, like say Manchester by the Sea was from Amazon Studio, and you should know like what you're gonna get. Like that wasn't catering internationally. Like honestly,
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
people are not gonna be able to relate to that. But it's kind of knowing the market, and I feel like it's really sad that like Transformers, those kind of bigger blockbuster movies, they really are just kind of cookie cuttered
Yeah.
to fit.
Yeah.
But when you go see that, like you're going there for the explosions and the Michael Bay special effects. You're not going there for some tears and inspiration. So, but I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of this line. Like, I don't blame them because honestly, Hollywood's struggling right now. But at the same time, it just seems so cheap. And I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like a slap in the face for China too. I feel like.
At the same time, I could see Mo's point, how it's in the positive aspect of this is that film has the power to bridge cultural divides,
Yeah.
and I think it should be used that way. It's just that when they cross that line into cynical territory where they're just blatantly making movies, making a quick buck and dumbing down the art,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's when it's offensive to me.
And there's definitely some really
Not-
cynical stuff that I think goes on. Like I think one example is casting Irfan Khan, who's a great Bollywood actor in The Amazing Spider-Man, and he did a wonderful job in
As good
that
as can
movie.
be expected
Yeah,
in that movie.
but I mean it was a tiny role, and he was just there to sell more tickets in India, and I think it did a disservice to him because he's a talented guy, and it did a disservice to the audience in India to kind of give this lip service like, oh, we're going to take your star, but just put him in a tiny role, and I think that's I think there's false advertising there to a certain degree.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that kind of bothers me with Hollywood. It's really not. It's not so much about talent as much either. I feel like, you know, putting A-list actors in certain movies, maybe they weren't the best for the role, but since they're A-listers, they're going to bring more people and they're going to bring more money.
Sure.
So I kind of feel like the same thing, like, he's very talented, but it's like, well, we're only going to do this much because we're getting this much money from it. It's not actually well, we value your talent and like let's put a role in here that actually uplifts Amazing Spider-Man as well. And I don't know, you can kind of tell because the choppiness of it.
Oh,
I feel
yeah.
like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a little, can get a little cheap at times, and it's just the part of Hollywood that.
And this is why I mean, we kind of touched on this earlier, but I mean, this is why I think there's definitely a feeling right now of they don't make them like they used to, and to a certain extent that's true. But I think everything we're bringing up is just why to see the great really exciting history defining moments in cinema that are happening. You really have to look beyond what's being done in the mainstream. You gotta look to a film like Manchester by the Sea or Moonlight, because there is exciting stuff happening, and I have a lot of faith in cinema as an art form, but it's just I feel like it's only rarely now going to come from the expected places, in my opinion.
But I kind of agree with what Mo said about Guardians of the Galaxy, where back in the day that would have never been able to be made, but because of our advancements,
that's true. Yeah.
It is an amazing thing when you watch that movie and you're like, it's amazing what we can do now, and that this could come to life, So in that way, I think it's the same thing with Transformers. They could have made it in 1950. It would have been these little
it would have looked really hokey back then.
The same thing with Star Wars. Now it's like technology is so different now that we could see things that we could never have seen before. It's always that balance, and it's always that fine line where it's like,
Have we moved in this generation or epoch in filmmaking where they've solved the visual problem? There's nothing else to solve in terms of visual spectacle.
Not quite. I think there's a lot of problems to solve. I mean, you look at the what I love to call the Great Tarkin disaster in Rogue One. I mean, it's with computer generated humans.
That's the next step.
Yeah, and I don't want
that came to mind
virtual
actors.
It's like the poster child for all that stuff.
Perfected.
Virtual actors.
And honestly, I don't necessarily want it to be perfected.
There's serious
ethical issues.
Yeah.
Like also like
bringing people back.
Are we
going
to bring back Carrie Fisher?
Yeah. Are we going to bring back Charlie Chaplin from the dead? Who else are we going to bring back from the dead?
And they're going to do their acting for them.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly.
I don't know.
So
that's an ethical question.
You're plagiarizing someone's skin.
And I don't
plagiarizing skin.
I don't care if the estate of the actor in question gives permission. That's not my concern. My concern is that it feels wrong and it feels creepy, and to be honest, it just does not look good.
Well, and I know it's not him.
Yeah.
Because he's dead.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't really want that to be perfected.
No.
I don't want a world
to some
where
degree,
we can do anything.
To some degree, I would, but it's like, just so if we're gonna do a thing where it's like with Tron Legacy, it's like
Tron Legacy
we're gonna make young Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like a weird clay monster thing. Where he actually looks like young Jeff Bridges.
Yeah, that was actually done for
But that's
and that was like 7 years ago.
that was 2010.
So,
Wow.
So, but the thing is, Rogue One, it did not look like. I don't know. I felt like Tron Legacy was better graphics in that area than Rogue One. But it might have been because there was more in Rogue One.
I don't know.
Princess Leia looked good.
She was there for like 10 seconds.
I know that.
That's why it was good.
Yeah, like that. Like just doing that briefly. That fooled me for long enough. I think it comes from like prolonged exposure. When you're really staring at it.
I was
it's
like, whoa, they got that shot back in the 70s.
It's that bit.
What they were doing.
There's on American Gods recently. there's a moment where we meet Media, who's the goddess of television, and she only appears on TV screens, and she'll take the form of different TV icons. And so the first time we see her, she looks like Lucy from I Love Lucy, and she makes some comment where it's like, back then we were shooting on a soundstage. Nowadays we have HD TV. It makes everything look better, but it also makes us look worse.
That's such a great point, and it's so true. I mean, that exposes the imperfections, which is why I think, to an extent, like, solving a lot of the visual problems Hollywood has, like, I think is going to come from embracing imperfections. Like, I think this isn't something that I know is. I think I might be in the minority in liking this, but I love J.J. Abrams' lens flares. I think they add like a certain texture to it.
I guess it's his signature, right?
Well,
You could say.
I think you have to get into the director's aesthetic, and it's kind of like auteur directors.
Sure.
And I think that's definitely his signature label. I love it. Like
I
Alfred
love it too,
Hitchcock always appearing in his film.
Yes,
It's one of those things. It's a signature. Signature deal. I mean, I'm like love J.J. Abrams, so I'm biased. I'm playing right now. I'm very biased.
No, I love J.J. Abrams too.
But
Yeah.
I think one thing though that kind of I'm a huge fan of kind of the 80s with the Labyrinth. And Never-Ending Story, and just like the creativity that went behind that, where a lot of them were puppets,
Because they had tech limitations, so they had to be creative.
Yeah.
The visual storytelling.
One thing I feel like where we rely so much more on CGI, and it's like.
This is the discussion we had however many weeks ago when we did like the CGI feature takeover.
We did.
I feel like it's kind of sad. I don't know if you guys watch that show Face Off. But it's kind of about
I know of it.
Makeup artists and
we've heard of that,
we don't even really use creature makeup artists that much anymore. Like I think Guardians of the Galaxy is great because they do that still.
It's a mix with them, but
like the Hobbits, they went more CGI route because it's cheaper. So in some ways, I feel like
it's also like, again, this is repeating a point. It's also to some degree easier. Like you take prosthetics, they're very intricate.
Oh yeah.
And they only look good from one certain angle, so you gotta try to shoot them right.
I mean, it eats that time because that actor is more in the chair with that makeup. It just eats away more money. Yeah. But at the same time, it looks more authentic to me. I like it. That's what I liked about J.J. Abrams when he did The Force Awakens.
Yeah, I was gonna say
those creatures
brought back
nostalgia of the 70s when they actually had to make these.
And it does kind of look better on 35 millimeter. Actually.
I like it. Better than also the prequels you look at when George Lucas relied on CGI, and to me,
it doesn't hold up.
Look like crap.
Yeah.
You look at the puppet Yoda versus the CGI Yoda. Yes, the CGI Yoda could do more, but he wasn't he wasn't real, and
he
even
was flipped too much too. I feel like he went overboard. He was just constantly flipping.
And the puppet was always going to be more believable because it was actually there. It was a physical presence that Mark Hamill was interacting with.
They're not acting with the green dot. They actually see this puppet.
But at the same time, I think Puppet Yoda may not have aged the best.
Oh no, he aged beautifully. I personally.
That's why I like the Muppets. Is that you go in yes, it's clearly a frog made out of green felt. Now you're gonna feel some emotion for that goddamn frog.
Oh yeah. Oh, I wept over that 2011 Muppets movie. Yeah. Well, we've got one more question here, and it's a brilliant question I think that Patrick came up with, and we could, I'm sure, talk all day about films and the ethics of criticism, but this is a good one I think to close on, and it's are some films more worthy of criticism than others? And since you posed it, Patrick, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Writing film reviews for Healthy Orange, I find myself wanting to write more towards films that I had major problems with. If there was a film that I thoroughly enjoyed and didn't have too many major problems with, I felt like, okay, what am I going to write about? What am I going to talk about? I'm going to just talk about what I loved about it and what worked about it. I kind of feel like I'm just shilling for the studio. It's not. It's more of a. It's more of a review / marketing thing than an actual criticism. I like movies that have a real gray area to them, and just because it has a gray area to them doesn't mean that I dislike them. It just gives me more to talk about and allows me to get into its internal contradictions, and I think that's really interesting to think about.
Yeah. Well, it takes me back to when I reviewed that movie, the Light Between Oceans, with Michael Fassbender and Alicia Vikander, and that movie had the first act of that movie was one of the best things I'd seen that year, but the last 2 acts not so much. And I think it is fun to kind of like get into that gray area, because you end up talking about good and bad things.
Sure.
Yeah. But Mo, what about you?
Yeah, some of them, like depending on how much effort goes into it. It's tough. Like comedies are tough to review for one hand, because you're talking about, is it good or is it bad? Do the jokes land? That's the real question. Do you laugh at a comedy? And if you say yes, then you can't really go into details, because part of the point of comedies is that there's surprise. You don't know what the joke's going to be. And then if it's not funny, it's just like, this isn't funny. There's only so many ways you can say that. Movies that are bad in interesting ways, those are worth talking about. Like Batman v Superman is not a good movie, but it's a not good movie in so many different ways.
Yeah.
It's always fun to beat it on Zack Snyder.
It's
So many layers of bad.
Yeah.
it is a 7-layer cake of bad.
Only 7?
But it's like that's more, again, it's engaging with the media. It's like, does it have something to say? Does it fall short in some way or another? So yeah, I think some films are more interesting to go into than others. Yeah.
Sarah?
I like to kind of go back and forth with British films and American films.
Ooh.
Critiquing wise, I'm a huge fan of British films. I feel like acting wise, they're so much better.
Yeah.
And I
No
feel
argument there.
Yeah, and I feel like the actors are kind of infiltrating American cinema. Like Henry Cavill is playing Superman now.
Look at Christian Bale. Yeah,
playing
nobody knows
Batman.
where Christian Bale's from anymore.
Christopher Nolan. I mean, like these. So I feel like it's kind of like Hollywood, or it's kind of seeing that like we are, the mega movie masters. But I feel like that's really changing, and I feel like it's really interesting, because I feel like here in America we make like cinematography wise, I feel like it's still pretty on top of the game. But it's interesting, because with Sherlock in British television, they kind of went places that we'd never been before, and so which kind of drew our attention. So I feel like really critiquing both of them, when I feel like acting wise, I think in America we're suffering. I can't really think of one American actor that I really like as far as talent wise, but I tend to more critique American films than British films, which is really interesting, and I'm trying to figure out why.
I think it's interesting that you bring this distinction between American and British, because I think I could be wrong because I'm not an actor, but in the UK I get the sense that they have a strong classically trained theater background in their acting traditions, and they bring that into the television and film realm. Whereas in America, it's a much younger country, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think everything is so focused on Hollywood, where it is film and television. That's their baseline. So, and I don't know that there's as strong of a classically trained theater culture in America as opposed to Britain. So that's probably why there are differences.
Yeah, and I think too, like we kind of take models or something and be like, well, she modeled, can't she act?
Right.
Yeah, I was just about to say, why is she acting?
Like,
I know Valerian as well.
What is she doing? But I feel like, yes, I think that almost all my favorite actors from England are all classically trained in theater.
Yeah, Picard,
and I feel like
Picard.
It used to be,
Patrick Stewart.
That way. Like I'm a huge fan of our older like golden actors that we had, like Betty Davis, Clark Gable, like Jimmy Stewart, Cary Grant. Jimmy Stewart and Cary Grant never even went into acting.
Right.
Never studied it, and I think so. That's kind of interesting to me, though. I feel like,
Of course, because this is the country of Shakespeare and the Globe Theatre, and that they have to live up to that heritage.
and I wonder
Right.
like what have we lost though? And I think our standards in America are kind of gone lower as far as acting wise. That's just kind of a personal opinion, but I feel like we're so much more drawn to British actors, but then they're just disguised with
Because they do it
American
better.
accents.
yeah.
I feel like almost every time people are like, wait, that guy's Scottish, that guy's British?
Yeah.
What?
Right.
That man's
right.
British,
Fooled you.
Superman is British.
Fooled you on so many levels. They're infiltrating like our classics. I don't know. I feel like that's just very interesting to me.
We were talking about our favorite actors the other day, and in terms of people, working now, the two names that popped into my head were Christian Bale and Ava Green, so a Welsh actor and a French actress, and I even see that a little bit with directors, to be honest, because I was thinking about my favorite film of each year in this decade. For the most part, they've been all films by directors who aren't American.
Yeah.
I think Damien Chazelle for La La Land was the first. Before I had George Miller, a lot of Christopher Nolan,
It's also
Nicholas
the youngest,
Refn.
I think.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
Thank you, America. I feel like too, it's just. I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh, I was gonna say is I thought it was really Jake Gyllenhaal has kind of gotten on my radar a little bit. Because
Yeah.
he's also in theater too now. But I feel like his range, he's kind of doing darker films, and he's not so much interested in A-list films, but I feel like he's just like looking at Nocturnal Animals. For example.
Yeah, I
It's
love
very
Nocturnal Animals.
and I think kind of getting in that area, which I feel like British directors are more, I don't know, they kind of do weirder things,
Yeah,
which I think we're starting to really like.
yeah.
Christopher Nolan.
Bring more of the weird, yeah.
Talking about signatures, he tends to bring his subject matter into surreal territory. I
Yeah.
really
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I'm
yeah.
curious what he's going to do with Dunkirk.
Yeah.
I'm really.
If it's a straightforward World War II movie, I'll be sorely disappointed.
Oh, me too. Yeah, I mean, you think about, Christopher Nolan. So many themes he's really attentive to, but the big one is time. All his movies are about time in some way, and Dunkirk, having three separate stories. One on the beaches, one on the air, one on the land. You've it's on
One
the
on the
sea.
sea.
That's right.
Yeah, sure.
Sea,
Land,
land,
sea,
air.
air.
Yeah. But they're all taking
Planes,
place over
trains, and
different.
automobiles.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh wait, no, planes, trains, and boats.
They're taking place over different periods of time. I think some are hours, weeks or whatever. But I'm curious to see that. But as far as are some films more worthy of criticism than others?
Worthy is again, that's objective. Is it more interesting to talk about?
Yeah,
to me?
absolutely. I think all films are interesting to talk about. Right down from something like Avatar to a 30-second student film. But I think the films that are maybe the most interesting to talk about and maybe the most important to talk about are movies that plug into what's happening in the world in some way. I was thinking about on my way here. I wasn't writing reviews in 2002, but the first Spider-Man film was a big deal, and I think part of that was after 9/11, a story about a working class New Yorker taking the law into his own hands had a certain resonance. Whereas I'm not excited at all to review the new upcoming Spider-Man film because I don't see what creative or cultural point there is in making it now. Whereas I'm really excited to review Wonder Woman because for me, the first Wonder Woman movie coming out, in the Trump era, like that, I think that's going to be a really, really interesting conversation. So.
Well, I think too, this is very superficial. It's more fun, I guess, to talk about popular movies. Where
Yeah.
when-
Sure.
If it's something that like
Yeah.
lots of people are going to see,
And I think
you know,
it's kind of
that
this
has a really
natural
broad
thing
appeal.
for me when someone like a movie's super popular and I feel like everyone doesn't find it, like Frozen, for example. Everyone's like, that it's the best animated film ever. And for
Right.
me, it was funner to critique that one.
Sure.
To kind of talk to people
Sure.
more about challenging what they thought, because no film is a perfect film.
Right.
Because it made Frozen more interesting that it resonated with people so strongly.
Yeah.
Like I think had I just seen it, you know, before all the hype, I would have gone, you know, oh, you know, that was, you know, an interesting diversion. And then to have it be as big as it got, it's like, then you get the question of why is it so big? You know, what and getting to the heart of that, I think is fascinating.
Did you guys see Frozen in the movie theaters?
No, I
I
saw it on
did, yeah.
DVD.
I saw it.
Because I'm wondering if it's a type of movie you have to see in the theater.
No.
Eh.
I feel like the
That's-
problem with seeing in theaters, you're there with like 500 5-year-olds who are
Oh, that's not good.
crying and screaming, so you're like, shut up, I'm trying to listen. So the peace and quiet of your own home is a little bit better, but
I'm just wondering because I saw it on a small screen for the first time and I didn't like it so much.
I think for me, now we're getting to Frozen, but I think for me it was more musically, I didn't see what was such a big deal, because when you think about the old Disney films where it's such great music,
Yeah.
but you don't, it's also a question of generation too, it's like,
Sure.
you know.
No, I mean, but I
Maybe
love
I'm too old
musicals.
for this. I don't know.
Well,
I
this
get-
reminds me of a great story. I used to be a camp counselor, and one of the girls who was, you know, in my group that I looked after, one day she says, I think I'm the only girl who doesn't like Let It Go. And I was
I don't
like,
like it. I don't like it either.
I think this is what I was talking about earlier. It's part of nostalgia, but it's also this sort of postmodernist angle, like the idea of Disney being self-critical to some extent of their own formula, aware of what are the ideas that they're putting out, and do those have toxic implications?
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
So this is the cycle that at least I went through, and a lot of people I know went through, is that when you're a kid you love Disney, and then when you're a teenager you're a snarky idiot who thinks they know everything, and it's like, oh, this is actually blah 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 blah, and it's really bad that this, that, and the other thing exists in these stories. And then you grow up, and then you kind of look back fondly on it. It's like, oh, this was good, and then you get to something like Frozen that, again, it's self-critical. It's looks at the Disney formula and makes jokes at its own expense, and it's like, that's it. That caters to me. That's still the Disney stuff that I love, but with a more modern edge to it. And I think that's what tapped into it. Also, I think the music was good. I don't think it was like the greatest thing ever. It's not my favorite Disney songs ever, but it was well put together.
Might be one of those things too where it's worn out. Like, I feel like whenever I have a conversation with someone and I'm like, you know, just let it go, and then she always says, let it go, and I'm like,
just-
can we please just have a conversation?
Like, has that become one of those phrases like, who you gonna call?
Oh, yeah.
That has been destroyed by
yeah,
popular
I
culture.
think that's what it is. It's just like, oh, now I just can't.
Right,
Think about
It's just
it.
so
Stop.
seeped into pop cultural osmosis.
I think also, you know, the fact that it was about two sisters might have had something to do with the popularity as well,
Oh, yeah.
as opposed to, you know, being focused on a love story. I think that was pretty novel. You know,
Again, it's the
anyway.
heteronormativity of Disney. It's something that you kind of come to critique when you become a snarky douchebag who thinks he knows everything.
I kind of think too when the prince turned out to be bad, like
That was a well done plot twist.
I was
Yeah.
like, oh, you know, like
Yeah.
I kind of, and then I thought, well, maybe I should have predicted this, but then you didn't, because it was this kind of thing where, well, this is a Disney movie, that's not going to happen, and then Disney's like, gotcha.
Right,
But it did happen.
right.
But
That was just, I just think that was a well constructed plot twist.
It was
it's
pretty
very
well done.
socially applicable, because I feel like we're living in a time where people want to see strong female characters, and so it
Yeah.
came out perfectly, the rise of that, and kind of now it's it's one of these things that everyone wants. You know, you've got critics counting, like, how many times did we see a strong female actress in this, like, 2016, 2017? That's the new thing.
Yeah, looking at the actual numbers.
Yeah, and you think kind of like, well, J.J. Abrams, almost all of his works, he's always had a strong female character. So when he came out with The Force Awakens, but that, I don't know if that socially, it was kind of this thing that people now want to see more of that, which I think it's a good thing.
Absolutely,
because women have kind of been seen like sexually in films. It's kind of this thing like, that's not enough for us anymore. We want to see something different.
Yeah.
I think Frozen really was the kickoff for that.
For a lot of people who, this is something I heard, is that they would go and see Mad Max Fury Road, and one of the things is like, we have female action characters who are not sexualized.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like that was enough to get them in the theater.
Well, I think, Fury Road was a real trailblazer. I like thinking about that in contrast to Terminator 2, where I mean Sarah Connor I think is a great action heroine, but in the end it's
probably ahead of its time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in the end it's still the Arnold who gets to kill the silver morphing metal dude, where in the Fury Road, even though it's Max's name that's in the title, it's Furiosa who gets to kill Morton Joe, and I think that was
the hero of the story, but it's Max's story.
It's almost like
the weird division.
He was just like our the narrative way into her.
He's our point of view
world,
character. He's the one who has an arc to him.
Yeah, I feel like too, it's not that knight in shining armor complex where it's like she needed him to save. I don't see it in that way. It was kind of equal.
Yeah.
And I think.
But now we're getting into feminist theory. Yeah. And that's another discussion.
But I think that's one of the things that made it so strong, because I loved her character, but I love Mac. I don't know. It wasn't this thing where we were looking at them specifically like Charlene. I wasn't looking at her as like a sexual object. I was looking at her as a strong character, just like Max.
Yeah. Just as a human being in this incredibly dire situation.
Yeah. And you're looking more at the spectacle too, how amazing the production design is.
I just thought it was super funny how that movie triggered the men's rights crowd.
See, that's the thing. Nowadays, there's like 4 tests for female representation in movies. We have the Bechdel test, which is are there more than one named female characters in their movie? Do they have a conversation with each other? Is that conversation not about a man?
Right.
And that's the Bechdel test. The Mako Mori test, which is, does a female character have a character arc that is seen to completion and does not depend on the presence of a man? There's the Sexy Lamp test, where can you replace a female character with a sexy lamp and nothing changes? And if that happens, you're a fucking hack. And my favorite is the Furiosa test, which, does the existence of your movie piss off men's rights activists? Because if it does, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
I think the Furiosa test should be, does your heroine rip a dude's jaw off with a cable? I mean,
that too.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all I got. Do any of you have any final thoughts you want to add before we sign off?
I think
critics, yay.
Yes.
There's a question that I don't feel is completely resolved, but I don't think it'll be ever resolved. I think we kind of came to a consensus that it's criticism is pretty subjective thing. But if I were to put it in a question form, it's what level of fairness is it for a reviewer to bring in their biases, strong biases, into the film, into their viewing experience, and writing about that film as a critique? For example, if I were to see the next Transformers movie that's coming out, I will have very strong reactions to it because of my strong reactions to the previous version, to the previous film. So what is the ethical or fair, range to bring into a new review? Like, is it fair? Like for instance, for all I care, the director, or whatever his name is, I can't remember, think of his name, could have corrected a lot of the problems I had with the previous film, but I'm not giving him a chance because of my biases that I brought into it. Like, where is the ethical boundaries in that area?
Well, I mean, to follow up on that, I mean, let's imagine for a moment. This ain't gonna happen, but let's imagine for a moment that Transformers: The Last Knight is, a really excellent, thought-provoking, beautifully constructed work of art.
Right.
I think even hating the last one, I think you would still if it really was good, you would say so. I mean
Maybe, but but what if I went into it so blind with my biases because of my terrible experience of the last time? Like, would I be writing a fair critique of the new one?
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's important to point that out in the beginning of your critique. Like maybe pointing back to, well, let's just remember what I thought about the last one. And here is where my biases might lie. Like starting out with that and then going into how you felt about the actual film that you saw. So I feel like it's stating those biases first. Because I wouldn't hold it against them. I actually like that when someone's honest about...
Sure.
Honestly, I didn't really care. Like, Lord of the Rings was a huge one. Like, I love the first Lord of the Rings, some people would say, and then they talk about how much they hated the Hobbits, and, like, for these reasons why. But I think it's not necessarily going into it that I'm completely unbiased, and then you're just straight up biased. I think too, like putting yourself personal perspective, like say me as a female, saying like me as a female, like I haven't seen like a strong character in this way, and this is why this made me feel this way, or specific ethnic background or racially or anything like that. I feel like rather than say like a straight white male talking about a black female, I don't know, I feel like you get into dicey area that way, but...
Well, I mean, like, I think this brings up something which I think is, important to remember is, no critic is infallible. I mean, this kind of work, I think, is a constant learning curve, and I think it is okay to make mistakes. I mean, for instance, one mistake I made was in high school, how I basically learned what the auteur theory was by watching Bryan Singer's films. It was by watching, X-Men and, Superman Returns and The Usual Suspects and noting, the commonalities, between those films. That's how, I, came to understand the concept of, how, of authorship in movies, over the course of different narratives. And, as a result, when X-Men Days of Future Past came out, I got overexcited. I was like, thank God, after, Jack the Giant Slayer, finally a good Bryan Singer movie. And, and then, I came back to watch it again and I was like, gosh, I think, in my excitement, I inflated how good this movie is because it has a lot of issues. And so, I said, okay, I didn't get that one right, I'm going to get it right the next time. And so, when X-Men Apocalypse came out, I told it like it was and said, this is a piece of shit. And so, I mean, it's a... I like moments of it. I I don't hate all of it.
I agree, yeah.
But I think, I think what you're pointing to, Patrick, is, this is kind of the eternal struggle.
Sure.
I mean, and I think, and I think anyone, who, is dedicated to this and, does this, in a conscious, and thoughtful way, like I think all of us do, I think is, gonna, always be getting better and always, dealing with these kinds of things.
I think that's kind of hard because I feel like for me, like you were saying with Bryan Singer, like J.J. Abrams for me, it's almost like this thing where, you could do no wrong. And then I kind of had that moment when I saw Super 8. I was like, maybe he can do something wrong.
I felt that way with Super 8 too.
But I feel like it's one of those things that's kind of hard for me because I'm just almost everyone has like favorite director, their favorite actor.
Sure.
They're diehard. And so it's kind of hard to critique something.
Right.
You're not really critiquing the work, you're more so still critiquing
You're critiquing
the
their
person.
entire canon.
That's kind of tricky for me
It
as
is.
far as I almost feel like critics should say these are my favorite or stay
that's
away
a good
from
point.
it? Should you not critique things that are
I think
totally your favorite?
it's a balance. Like, I mean, I'm also, as Patrick knows and Mo knows, a big fan of Terrence Malick, and I think and definitely I'm predisposed to like any Terrence Malick film because I like his style. So I mean, there's pitfalls in that because I have to check myself. I have to say is he batting at full strength, or is this movie I'm watching a weaker entry in the Malick canon? But there's a trade-off. Being someone who likes his films, I think I have a pretty rich insight into what makes him tick. So I think there are advantages to like having these these favorites you're like really obsessed with too.
I think it's almost like saying too in the same realm. I say Terrence Malick, it's like, well, this wasn't as strong as his other films.
Sure.
Like kind of basing it on his other works in comparison, which I think that can kind of be key, because not everyone is, I wouldn't say an expert, but they're not super like knowledgeable about certain directors. And
Definitely,
like that is
yeah.
when a critic can come in very valuable when there's a specific director that they love and they can critique it in comparison to their other works.
Yeah.
I think
it's a great point. Yeah.
I think I've come to a definition to this conundrum for myself anyways. I think it's, for the most part, it's important to know where to draw the line.
Yeah.
Where you're allowing your baggage to color the present experience of it.
Baggage is a good word.
Yeah.
Because we were kind of discussing this last time when we were talking about Knight of Cups. Well, not Knight of Cups.
Song to Song.
Song to Song.
Right.
I don't know how many times we reference Knight of Cups when we're talking about Song to Song.
We reference it a lot.
Like half the discussion was
Oh, there's a
Knight of Cups.
drinking game for
Yeah,
you.
there you go. So
I think the job is to start the discussion.
So it's kind of like responsibility to the critic.
So you.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Sorry, Patrick.
No. You're just as a side note, you're touching on a very, very fruitful discussion, and maybe that could be a question for next time.
Yeah.
Is are critics in an ivory tower compared to everybody else, and how to, what is
I try
the
not to
position
be.
to that?
Well, I mean, it's like.
Well, if you were talking about like mainstream sources like the New York Times, Variety, or all these, the critics that work for these organizations, are they in an ivory tower?
Yeah. Well, I feel like a good example of that is that, say there's a guy dying on the floor in a coffee shop, and there are two people. One guy, has read a lot of medical things, and then there's a doctor. Who are you gonna rather want to save your life?
Sure.
It's kind of the guy with the PhD. It's kind of that thing of more knowledge. So I guess that also comes back to the critic. Is it this guy that just talks about things from his house and hasn't seen that many films, or someone who's more reputable and has that? So I feel like they are kind of in an ivory tower because you just expect that they have more knowledge than you, I guess, as just a regular moviegoer. I guess seeing like my friends that just go movies for fun, they'll ask me, what did you think about that? Or so I feel like it kind of comes with the title of a critic.
Sure.
Kind of.
And the reason why I do ask is because this is a very legitimate phenomenon where, critics loved it. It's like this blah, 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 like at fancy tea parties, they loved it. But then on Rotten Tomatoes, it's like everybody hated it. That kind of stuff. Why is there such a big divide sometimes?
I mean, I think the big divide is, I mean, for one thing, regular moviegoers only see, specifically what they want to see. Critics, are seeing things maybe they're assigned to see that they don't necessarily want to see. So they're maybe going to be harsher. But then it's just, I mean.
I wonder if social pressure though. And sometimes I feel pressured to like the same movie as someone else.
Oh, yeah.
But if you ask me my raw, what did you think of this film, and I don't know anyone else's opinion, you're gonna get like the actual raw opinion.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's a lot of social pressure.
For critics or for moviegoers? Or,
It's an
or
interesting
both?
thing.
There is that aspect of seeking validation for opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Because that's something I do. I'll admit to that.
Like usually,
Yeah, I think we all do.
there's not many Simon Cowells in the world because you're looked at like, oh, I'm hateful and I don't like anything. Kind of.
Right.
So I wonder if there's social pressure on critics too.
I think he's just kind of contrarian, but that's
I
my
think he likes that. I don't know. He kind of likes to contradict everything, but I don't know.
Anyways, I think we're touching into something more deeper. Like for instance, me and you. Do you and I just really like Terrence Malick because we have some fancy honors degree, versus Joe Mechanic who watches the same movie and thinks it's absolute shit. You know.
I mean, I think like, I mean, to use this example, you and I, like Terrence Malick because of everything that's happened to us in our lives. Something about our experiences, shape the way we think in a way that kind of thing, resonates with them. And I think that's true of every viewer. Like not just critics. I mean, I think that's how you can have divided opinions and have someone who says Rogue One was the best Star Wars film since The Empire Strikes Back versus us saying oh it was dull, it was a mess. I mean, and I think I don't know. I mean, I think that's exciting because there's no discussion about that, and that's why we're able to do what we do. And I want us to speak to something else, like the idea of seeking validation for opinions. I think like it's kind of interesting that I think, at least I feel as a critic, there is like a need to connect with people, like a need to be like understood. And every time I like something that no one else likes or hate something that seems like everyone else likes, there's this I get worked up about it, because like I want like you gotta understand what I'm thinking here, and that's like I don't really know any way to make that easier, but I think ultimately you have to look inward because whatever people say they're not going to be happy if you're not giving them a really true opinion.
Well, I think what's exciting too, if you're so passionate about a film that you're willing to fight for it, or if you passionately hate it, you're that's what's exciting. If you don't care about a movie, you'll just like if someone says, "Oh, I hated it," you're like, "Okay, cool." Like you just walk away.
Yeah.
But those are the best kind of films when they elicit either strong love for it or strong hatred.
The worst thing a movie can do is bore you.
Yes.
Where there's
Yeah.
we were talking about that earlier, like it's just this middle line where you're like, like, you don't really care. You don't care. That's how I feel about Citizen Kane, and I'm just like, But then some people, it's just a strong passion, like, you have to love it.
Right.
I thought Citizen Kane was pretty boring.
Yeah, thank you. I got chastised in film school for that.
I think just on some level it was like the first to do all these filming techniques, and then like this is stuff we've perfected since then. Like it was the first of the gate, but we've done those ideas in different and new and interesting ways since then.
Yeah, I mean I like Citizen Kane, but I would never I mean it's not even on like my it's probably wouldn't be on my top 200 of all time even what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's I think that's why that's what criticism can do. I think that's the most exciting thing when someone says they don't like Citizen Kane, or when someone says Michael Bay is really an abstractionist at heart or something, and it's like I may not get that, but that's fun when that's out there. I mean that's what makes it all worthwhile.
It's crazy too to think like Citizen Kane was like the best movie of its day, and now how that's changed. Like you could, and then kind of question like what's the best movie of today? Like 40 years ago, what's the movie that we were talking about then? Which is also kind of, I feel like critics are the ones that move and shape for that to become the path for the new generation of filmmakers.
And it's interesting like how things change. When you look at a movie like Blade Runner that was a bomb upon its release, and then now President Obama said it's one of the best sci-fi films of all time.
Now they're making another one.
Right. So I mean, things things change, and I think even opinions change with time.
Which I think
definitely.
a good discussion would be like, 39 was like the golden year of cinema.
Uh-huh.
Kind of think, do you think we've hit that again, or will we ever hit that again? That'd be a good question.
Oh gosh, now that that's out there, I have to get into that a little bit. I think there were a couple years in this decade that were really amazing. Maybe not like golden age level, but I thought.
What year?
I thought 2013 was one for the ages.
13 was a good year.
I mean, we had.
I'm trying to remember what came out in 13.
See,
we
that's
had, like-
the thing,
we had,
I
like-
can't remember that.
We had like Gravity, we had 12 Years a Slave, we had American Hustle, we had The Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, it was just.
We had Frozen.
We already have Frozen.
We had X-Men First Class, I think.
But do you,
Or
A
no,
lot of
that was
iconic
2011.
releases.
Right.
are you talking as far as how well it did, or like personally how you, opinion-wise, you felt it was good?
Oh, opinion-wise,
Okay.
definitely, yeah.
I
in
think
terms
it's a mix
yeah.
of both for me, and for me it's like iconic releases, like films that you still think about today.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say like in the 90s also had a couple of years like that.
Oh, yeah.
Either like 97, 98, like when Fight Club and the original Matrix came out, those kind of movies.
Sure, yeah. Well, I found out a couple months ago that Star Trek 6 and Terminator 2 both came out the year I was born, so that made me happy.
I got
But-
that today.
Yeah, but I think that's a good note to end on. Thank you everybody for listening and sticking with us. If you like this podcast, and why wouldn't you? Please click thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like us on Facebook. And please check out all our great reviews at thomoviereviews.wordpress.com. Once again, I'm Bennett Campbell Ferguson here with Sarah Schroeder, Shaunette, and Patrick Belin. And from all of us here at T.H.O, happy movie watching.
Happy movie watching.
Bye-bye.